Combating student apathy in the classroom. Over the last 18 years, I had noticed a gradual increase in student apathy in my classrooms. Originally, I had thought it was a local phenomenon. However, as I got into my literature review, I found that it was an international problem, and that the terminology today for student apathy is student disengagement. Now, there were two schools of thought as to why students were disengaging. One was the technology, the amount of technology in their lives, and the lack of technology in schools. And the other was, of course, poor teaching. Now, there are also two schools of thought in the matter of combating student disengagement, and that is one-on-one instruction, which is not feasible in the public school system due to the size of our classes and the number of teachers that would have to be hired, or money, in other words. The other school of thought is collaborative group instruction using or based on the constructivist theory. Now, this has been around for decades and is supported wholeheartedly, in most cases, by most educators. This action research was conducted on one class of advanced placement literature with 18 seniors in an urban setting. The purpose for this action research was simply to identify ways to combat student apathy in the classroom. And the goal was to increase student interest by increasing their choice through the use of technology. The learning objectives were to create and evaluate based on the revised Bloom's taxonomy. Now, in Cycle 1, my district has a very tough firewall, and students don't have email, nor are they allowed to post, either to a board or to a blog. So I had to set up a class at classjump.com in order for them to do both of those things, because that was part of the constructivist application that I was going for. The students got to choose the members of their groups. The only instruction they were given was no more than 3 to 4 students per group. They were quite stunned that I was not assigning their groups, and they weren't real sure how to go about getting their peers to work with them, but eventually it worked out. They did sign a contract and turn in a contract to me, telling me when they were going to meet as a group, whether it was via text messaging or face-to-face in the library, etc. And they would assign jobs in their contract. They would also have to tell me how they were going to handle any kind of conflict that came up. The group's class assignments were to post to the site and respond to prompts both individually and respond to a peer's comments. There were guidelines for that, no personal comments, and it had to be relevant to whatever the prompt was that I had posted. The group also had a research assignment as a group, and it was based on a web quest called Never Again, Again by Burleson. Now, this was a web quest that had them researching genocide worldwide because they had just finished for their summer reading Mao's 1 and 2, and we were connecting the dots, so to speak. Now, the students within the group, the only direction they were given was everyone had to have a different country. They were really quite stunned when I refused to give them more direction than was in the web quest. In fact, they were quite insistent that I tell them what goes on each slide of their presentation. We were doing PowerPoint because at the time that's what we had available to us in school and what most of the students had available to them at home. When I refused to tell them what should go on each slide, it took them a while to figure out how they were going to set things up. And they were never very happy with me about the lack of dotting the I and crossing the T instructions. There was qualitative evaluation. Each member of the group got to review or evaluate the actions of their peers, and it was done in such a way that it was objective and that they were unable to make personal comments, even if they had had conflict within their group. They also had student interviews with me. Cycle 2 was a bit different. I went from group and choice to individual research with a choice of the poet they would research, and they were given limited one-on-one tutoring through coach class 4 days a week if they so chose to make themselves available for it. The coach class was held whether anyone showed up or not. In other words, if they didn't show up, they didn't get the one-on-one instruction. The results of Cycle 1 were disappointing, in my point of view. There was a 2% increase in work completion for what would have been considered the average group. In Cycle 2, there was a drop of 5% in student participation, and I expected that. The research paper was 10 pages, and most of the students at the time, we were so close to graduation due to the fact that we had had 3 blizzards and there had been a delay in beginning the second cycle, that the majority of the students considered themselves out of high school by this time. Now, because there was a minor increase in the cooperative cycle with student choice, I really believe that further research needs to be conducted in the classroom. I will be making some major changes to the research. Instead of having PowerPoint presentations, they will be using Glogster and make it interactive. Each person will contribute their portion to the interactive poster, and they will have much more creative outlet at this point. In the Cycle 2, instead of having the 10-page research paper, I'm going to have them do a multi-genre research with using multimedia and see how this will play out.